The transport shuttle touched down on Station Orbital 7 with barely a whisper. Hana Kim grabbed her single duffel bag and stepped onto the polished metal floor of the Galactic Defense Academy. She had dreamed of this moment for years, imagined walking these halls as an instructor, teaching the next generation of Coalition defenders. The reality felt much colder than her dreams. The station was massive, built by species who had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Everywhere she looked, Hana saw aliens. Tall ones, short ones with scales and ones with fur, ones that floated and ones that skittered. She was the only human in sight. A clicking sound made her turn. Commander Vextar approached, his insectoid body moving on 6 legs with perfect precision. His compound eyes studied her with something that looked like disappointment. He was easily twice her height, his carapace gleaming under the station lights. "Corporal Kim," he said. His voice came through a translator device, flat and emotionless. "You are late." Hana checked her watch. She was 3 minutes early. "Sir, follow me." He turned without waiting, his legs carrying him quickly down the corridor. Hana had to jog to keep up. They passed training halls where cadets practiced combat. Through one window, she saw a group of reptilian students wrestling, their movements powerful and precise. Through another, she watched 4-armed beings sparring with weapons she did not recognize. Everyone looked dangerous. Everyone looked like they belonged. Commander Vexitar stopped at a small office. Inside, a massive reptilian officer sat behind a desk. His scales were dark green and his eyes were cold. "This is Lieutenant Kriva," Vextar said. "He oversees physical training. He will explain your duties." Kriva looked at Hana the way someone might look at a stain on their uniform. So, the human. He leaned back in his chair. "I will be honest with you, Corporal. I did not want you here. None of us did. Your presence is a political requirement, nothing more." Hana kept her face neutral. She had expected this. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Coalition 5 years ago. They were still the newcomers, still viewed as primitive by species that had been building empires when Earth was discovering fire. "I understand, sir," she said quietly. "Do you?" Kriva's eyes narrowed. "Your species has won some battles, yes. But we believe this is luck, not skill. You are young, small, weak. What can you possibly teach warriors from races that have fought for millennia?" "I can teach what I know, sir." Kriva made a sound that might have been laughter. "What you know, yes." He pulled up a data pad. "You will be assigned to morning drill. The juveniles, the cubs," Hana blinked. "The youngest cadets?" "Ages 12 to 15 by your human standards," Vextar said. His tone suggested this was amusing. "They need someone to lead basic exercises, running, push-ups, simple things." The insult was clear. They were giving her the assignment that mattered least, where she could do the least damage. Babysitting children while the real instructors trained real warriors. "I see," Hana said. "You will start tomorrow at dawn," Kriva continued. "The main training yard. Do try not to embarrass yourself too badly. These cubs come from proud warrior families. Their parents are decorated veterans. They already know more about combat than most humans will learn in a lifetime." "Yes, sir." Dismissed. Hana left the office and found her way to the instructor quarters. Her room was small, barely large enough for a bed and a locker. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her hands. They were small hands, human hands, soft compared to claws or talons, weak compared to the powerful limbs she had seen today. She thought about Lieutenant Kriva's words. Young, small, weak. He was right, of course. She was all of those things. Most species in the Coalition could break her in half without trying. Even their children were stronger than she was. But she had not come here to be strong like them. She had come here to teach what humans did best, survive anyway. That evening, she met the only other human on the station. Yuna Choi worked in the medical wing, treating injuries from training accidents. She was older than Hana, maybe 35, with kind eyes and quick hands. "I heard they gave you the cubs," Yuna said over dinner in the mostly empty human section of the cafeteria. "I'm sorry." "It's fine," Hana said. "It's not fine. It's insulting." Yuna stabbed at her food. "They think we're a joke. 5 years in the Coalition and they still treat us like we're playing dress-up. Maybe we need to prove them wrong. With 12-year-olds? Hana, those aren't regular 12-year-olds. I've treated some of them in medical. They're already bigger and stronger than adult humans. Some of them have natural weapons. Claws, fangs, armor plating. You're going to stand in front of them and tell them to do jumping jacks? I'm going to try." Yuna sighed. "Just be careful." Some of the instructors here, they don't want humans to succeed. They'll look for any excuse to send you home. That night, Hana could not sleep. She lay in her small bed and thought about tomorrow. She thought about the cubs she would meet, the ones who were already stronger and faster and more dangerous than she would ever be. She thought about Lieutenant Kriva watching her fail. She thought about Commander Vextar's disappointment, but mostly she thought about why she had become a soldier in the first place. Hana had grown up small, always the shortest in her class, always the weakest in gym class, always the last picked for teams. She had joined the military because she wanted to prove that size did not matter, that determination could overcome natural disadvantage. She had survived training that broke larger recruits. She had earned her rank through persistence, through refusing to quit no matter how many times she was knocked down. The galaxy thought humans were weak. Maybe they were right, but weakness had never stopped her before. She got out of bed and did push-ups until her arms shook. Then she did more. Then she ran in place until sweat soaked through her shirt. Then she practiced the combat forms she had learned over years of training, moving through each motion with precision. When she finally collapsed back onto her bed, the station's artificial dawn was only an hour away. Tomorrow she would meet the cubs. Tomorrow she would probably embarrass herself. Tomorrow the other instructors would confirm their belief that humans did not belong here. But tomorrow she would also show up. She would do the work. She would not quit. That was what humans did best. She closed her eyes and slept. The main training yard was enormous, easily the size of 3 football fields. Hana stood in the center of it, feeling very small. The artificial sun was just rising over the station's horizon projection, casting long shadows across the metal ground. She was not alone. Around the edges of the yard, other instructors had gathered. Some leaned against walls, others stood in small groups. Lieutenant Kriva was there, his arms crossed over his massive chest. She could not see their expressions clearly, but she could feel their attention. They were waiting to watch her fail. The cubs arrived in a chaotic mass. There were about 40 of them, and Hana's first thought was that they were huge. She had known they would be bigger than human children, but knowing and seeing were different things. At the front of the group walked a young Velcresh that Hana would later learn was named Thornkal. He looked like a bear that had decided to walk on 2 legs. His fur was dark brown, his eyes were intelligent, and he stood nearly 7 feet tall despite being only 13 years old. His shoulders were broader than Hana's entire body. Beside him walked Priscilla, a Mandorian with sleek fur covered in spots and 4 powerful arms. Her feline face wore an expression of bored contempt. Behind them came Chilak, whose crystalline body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the ground. There were dozens more, each one representing a different species, each one looking more dangerous than the last. They stopped a few yards away from Hana and stared at her. Nobody spoke. The silence stretched out. Hana cleared her throat. "Good morning. I'm Corporal Kim. I'll be leading your morning drill from now on. Please form up in ranks of 5. Nobody moved." Priscilla yawned, showing sharp teeth. Thornkal sat down on the ground with a heavy thump. A few cubs in the back started talking to each other in languages Hana did not understand. "I said form up," Hana repeated, keeping her voice steady. Chilak made a sound like wind chimes. His translator rendered it as, "Why should we listen to you?" "Because I'm your instructor." "You are human," Thornkal said. His voice was surprisingly deep. "You are small, weak. What can you teach us?" It was the same question Lieutenant Kriva had asked. Hana had not had a good answer then. She did not have one now. "Form up," she said again. They did not form up. Instead, the cubs spread out across the yard, some sitting, some standing, some mock-fighting with each other. Priscilla started doing one-armed push-ups with 3 of her arms behind her back, clearly showing off. A reptilian cub began running sprints, his speed making him blur. The crystalline cubs clustered together, their bodies resonating with sound that made Hana's teeth ache. From the edge of the yard, Hana heard laughter. The watching instructors were enjoying this. She stood there for a long moment watching the chaos. She could shout. She could threaten. She could try to physically force them into line. All of those options would fail. These cubs were stronger than her, faster than her. They knew it, she knew it, and everyone watching knew it. So instead she started running. She did not run toward the cubs or away from them. She simply began running laps around the perimeter of the training yard. Her pace was steady, not sprinting but not jogging either. The pace she could hold for miles if she needed to. The cubs watched her for the first lap. By the second lap, some had returned to ignoring her. By the third lap, she heard more laughter from the watching instructors. By the fifth lap, her legs were burning, but she did not slow down. She ran 10 laps. Then she dropped and did 50 push-ups. Her form was perfect, her back straight, her breathing controlled. Then she moved to a pull-up bar and did 20 pull-ups. Then she went through a series of combat forms, each movement precise and practiced. Sweat soaked through her uniform. Her muscles screamed at her. She ignored them and continued. She had been exercising for 30 minutes when she noticed that some of the cubs had stopped talking. They were watching her. Not all of them, but some. There was something in their expressions that had not been there before. Confusion, maybe. Or curiosity. Thorncall stood up from where he had been sitting. "What are you doing?" Hannah finished her current set of exercises before answering. "Morning drill. By yourself?" "Someone has to do it. But we are not following you." I noticed. Prisna walked closer, her forearms hanging loose at her sides. "Do you think this will make us respect you?" "Watching you sweat?" "I don't care if you respect me," Hannah said. It was true. Respect was earned over time, not demanded. "I'm doing my job. You can do yours or not." "Your choice." She started running again. This time she heard footsteps behind her. She glanced back and saw a small group of cubs following her, maybe 5 or 6 of them. Not many, but some. They ran at her pace, matching her stride. By the time the hour was up, that group had grown to 10. They ran with her. They did push-ups when she did push-ups. They followed her through the combat forms, their movements clumsy but earnest. The rest of the cubs still ignored her. Thorncall had gone back to sitting. Prisna had left halfway through. Sheilak and his crystalline friends had not moved at all, but 10 cubs had chosen to follow her anyway. Hannah called the session to an end. "Dismissed," she said to everyone, even though most of them had never really started. The cubs left. The watching instructors left. Soon Hannah was alone in the training yard, breathing hard, her uniform dark with sweat. Lieutenant Kriva approached. His footsteps were heavy on the metal ground. He looked down at her with his cold, reptilian eyes. "That was pathetic," he said. "Yes, sir." "You accomplished nothing. Most of those cubs completely ignored you." "Yes, sir." "Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after that. They will never respect you because you are weak." Hannah met his eyes. "Maybe, but I'll be here tomorrow anyway." Kriva stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away. Hannah went back to her quarters and collapsed onto her bed. Every muscle hurt. She had bruises forming on her knees from the push-ups. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion. But 10 cubs had followed her. 10 out of 40. It was not much. It was not victory. But it was not complete failure either. She thought about Thorncall's question. "What are you doing?" She was doing what she always did. She was refusing to quit. She was showing up. She was doing the work even when nobody was watching, even when nobody cared. That was what humans did. They were not the strongest or the fastest or the most naturally gifted, but they kept going. They adapted. They survived. Tomorrow she would do it again, and the day after that, and the day after that. Eventually, maybe more than 10 cubs would understand. Or maybe they would not. Maybe Lieutenant Kriva was right and this was all pointless. Maybe she would fail completely and be sent home in disgrace. But she would fail trying. That counted for something. She closed her eyes and let exhaustion take her. 2 weeks passed. Every morning, Hannah stood in the training yard and led exercises. Every morning, more cubs joined her. By the end of the first week, she had 20 followers. By the end of the second week, it was 30. They ran with her. They did push-ups and pull-ups beside her. They copied her combat forms with increasing accuracy. The cubs who participated started arriving early, stretching before she even called them to formation. Some asked questions about technique. A few stayed after to practice more. But 10 cubs still refused. Thorncall led this group. He sat every day and watched, his massive arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Prisna made a show of doing her own exercises, always faster and stronger than anything Hannah demonstrated. Sheilak and the other crystalline cubs formed their own separate group, their resonating sounds suggesting they were discussing her in their private language. Lieutenant Kriva watched every session. His displeasure grew more obvious each day. On the 15th morning, he walked into the middle of the training yard and held up one clawed hand. "Stop," he commanded. The cubs stopped. Hana stopped. Everyone turned to face him. "This has gone on long enough," Kriva said. His voice carried across the entire yard. "Corporal Kim has been teaching you for 2 weeks. But what has she taught you? To run in circles? To do exercises any cub can do? This is not warrior training. This is softness. Human weakness." Hana said nothing. She stood at attention and waited. "In my species," Kriva continued, "we have a saying, the weak teach weakness. The strong teach strength. You have been learning from weakness." He turned his gaze to the cubs. "Your parents are warriors, decorated veterans. They would be ashamed to see you following a human who cannot even match your natural abilities." Some cubs looked uncomfortable. Others nodded. Thorncull remained perfectly still. "I will demonstrate," Kriva said. He gestured to Hana. "Corporal Kim, step forward." Hana stepped forward. "You will spar with Cadet Thorncull. Full contact, submission or incapacitation. This will show these cubs what happens when human methods meet warrior strength." Hana's stomach tightened. She looked at Thorncull. He was 13 years old and 7 feet tall. His species was 3 times stronger than humans on average. In a full contact fight, he could kill her without meaning to. "Sir," she said carefully, "with respect, I don't think—" "Are you refusing?" The question hung in the air. Hana knew what refusing meant. It meant admitting she was afraid. It meant confirming everything they said about humans. It meant losing whatever small respect she had earned. "No, sir," she said quietly. "I'm not refusing." "Good." Kriva smiled, showing all his teeth. "Begin when ready." Thorncull stood up. He looked apologetic as he walked to the center of the yard. "I do not want to hurt you," he said softly. "I know," Hana said. "Do your best anyway." They faced each other. Around them, every cub had formed a circle. From the edges of the yard, other instructors had gathered. Word had spread fast. Everyone wanted to watch the human get crushed. Hana took a deep breath and centered herself. She had fought larger opponents before. She knew she could not win on strength. Her only chance was speed, technique, and hoping Thorncull's youth meant he lacked experience. Thorncull moved first. For something so large, he was fast. His massive paw swung toward her head with enough force to crack her skull. Hana ducked under it, feeling the air move above her. She stepped in close and struck at his ribs, but it was like punching a wall. He barely noticed. His other paw caught her shoulder and shoved. Hana flew backward, hit the ground hard, rolled. She was back on her feet before he could follow up, but her shoulder already ached. They circled each other. Thorncull was being careful, she realized. He could rush her, overwhelm her with pure strength. But he was fighting like his instructors had taught him, with honor, with proper form. That gave her a chance. When he struck again, she did not try to block. She redirected, using his momentum against him, stepping aside and letting his weight carry him past her. She struck at the back of his knee as he passed. It was a good hit, solid technique, but his leg was like iron. The fight lasted 15 minutes. 15 minutes of Hana dodging, redirecting, looking for any weakness. 15 minutes of taking hits that rattled her bones whenever she was not fast enough. 15 minutes of refusing to stay down. She could not win. She knew that. Thorncull was too strong, too durable, but she could refuse to lose. Every time he knocked her down, she got back up. When he grabbed her arm and could have easily broken it, she twisted free. When he tried to pin her, she slipped away. Her face was bleeding. Her ribs screamed with pain. Her vision blurred from a hit she had not quite avoided. But she kept moving, kept fighting, kept refusing to submit. Finally, Lieutenant Kriva called it. "Enough! Draw!" Hana collapsed to her knees, breathing hard. Blood dripped from her nose onto the metal ground. Thorncull stood over her, also breathing hard, looking confused. "You did not win," he said. "I know," Hana gasped. "But you did not lose either." "How?" I kept getting up. Thorncull stared at her. Around them, the cubs were silent. Even Lieutenant Kriva seemed unsure what to say. That evening, Yuna treated Hana's injuries in medical. 2 cracked ribs, a broken nose, countless bruises, and a sprained wrist. "This is insane," Yuna said as she wrapped Hana's ribs. "They set you up to fail. That was not a fair fight." "No," Hana agreed. "It wasn't. So why are you smiling?" Hana had not realized she was smiling. But Yuna was right. Despite the pain, despite the obvious loss, she was smiling. "Because I survived," she said. "I fought someone 3 times my strength and I survived." Those cubs saw that. They saw that size is not everything, that there are other ways to fight. Hana, Yuna said gently, I need to tell you something. Admiral Drakmor, Thorncal's father, has filed a formal complaint. He says your methods are undermining traditional warrior culture. There is talk of sending you back to Earth. The smile faded. When? Soon, maybe a few days. I am sorry. Hana lay back on the medical bed and stared at the ceiling. She had known this might happen. The senior instructors did not want her here. They did not want humans here. One complaint from a high-ranking officer was all it would take. She had 2 weeks with the Cubs. Just 2 weeks to make any kind of difference. Maybe it had not been enough. Maybe she had failed after all. But that night, something unexpected happened. A message came through to her quarters. It was from Thorncal. Instructor Kim, it read, I have been thinking about our fight. You are smaller and weaker than me. This is fact. But you did not fight like you were smaller and weaker. You fought like prey that refuses to die. My father says this is shameful. But I think it is terrifying. I think humans are terrifying. I will see you at morning drill. Hana read the message 3 times. Then she lay down in her bed and let herself hope just a little bit that maybe 2 weeks had been enough after all. The next morning, Hana expected to be called to Commander Vextar's office. She expected to be told her assignment was over, that she would be sent back to Earth in disgrace. Instead, something completely different happened. All 40 Cubs showed up to morning drill. Every single one of them. Thorncal stood at the front of the formation, perfectly straight. Prisna was beside him, all 4 arms at her sides. Even Chilak and the crystalline Cubs had joined the group. Hana walked out to face them, her ribs still aching from yesterday's fight, her nose covered with a bandage. She stopped in front of the formation and waited. Thorncal spoke first. Instructor Kim, we talked last night, all of us. We decided something. What did you decide? That if they send you away, we will not attend drill anymore. Any of us, Hana blinked. You can't do that. You'll be disciplined. Your families will be angry, Prisna interrupted. Yes, we know. We do not care. Chilak's crystalline body resonated with sound. You taught us something the other instructors did not teach. You taught us that strength is not everything, that survival is more important than pride. You kept getting up, Thorncal added. I hit you many times. Hard enough to break bones, but you kept getting up. That is not weakness. That is the opposite of weakness. One of the reptilian Cubs stepped forward. His name was Sisera, and he had spent 2 weeks mocking Hana's methods. My people value speed and venom. We strike fast and kill fast. But yesterday I watched you survive against impossible odds. You did not try to be what you are not. You used what you had. That is intelligent. Hana looked at the 40 Cubs standing at attention. 2 weeks ago they had ignored her. 1 week ago half of them had followed her. Now they were ready to risk punishment to keep her. I don't want you to get in trouble for me, she said. Too late, Prisna said with a sharp-toothed smile. We already sent messages to our families explaining our decision. We told them we learned more from you in 2 weeks than from a year of traditional training. That's not going to make things easier. Nothing worth doing is easy, Thorncal said. You taught us that too. Morning drill that day was different. The Cubs did not just follow Hana's exercises. They adapted them. Prisna used all 4 arms during push-ups, creating a rhythm that was uniquely hers. Thorncal ran with weight on his back, turning the simple laps into strength training. Chilak moved through the combat forms with flowing grace, his crystalline body refracting light in beautiful patterns. They were not copying her anymore. They were learning from her and making it their own. Over the next few days, Hana noticed more changes. The Cubs, who had always relied on strength, started focusing on technique. The fast ones learned patience. The proud ones learned to help the weaker members of their group instead of mocking them. During a running exercise, Hana watched Thorncal slow down to run beside a smaller Cub who was struggling. The smaller Cub was a shardborn named Pick, and his crystalline body was dense, making running difficult. Thorncal could have lapped him 5 times. Instead, he matched Pick's pace and encouraged him. You do not have to be fast, Thorncal said. You just have to finish. That was not something traditional warrior training taught. That was something Hana taught. And now Thorncal was teaching it to others. Prisna stopped showing off during exercises. Instead, she started using her 4 arms to demonstrate different techniques to Cubs who struggled with the forms. She was surprisingly patient, breaking down each movement into simple steps. Even Sisera, who had hated Hana's methods, started incorporating human tactics into his training. His species was built for ambush and poison, not endurance, but he began running longer distances, building stamina he had never thought he needed. In a real battle, he explained to another cub, the enemy does not always die quickly. Sometimes you must outlast them. Instructor Kim showed me this. The senior instructors noticed these changes. Lieutenant Kriva watched the morning drills with increasing anger. The cubs were not training like warriors anymore. They were training like... He did not even have a word for it. Like humans. On the 5th day after the fight, Captain Jinwoo Lee arrived at the station. He was a human liaison officer, sent to represent Hana at the formal tribunal that would decide her fate. He met with her in a small conference room, his expression serious. I will be honest with you, he said. This looks bad. Admiral Drakmore's complaint has support from other senior officers. They say you are corrupting the cubs, teaching them to abandon their warrior traditions. Commander Vextar is under pressure to remove you. I understand, Hana said. I brought the best legal arguments I could find. But Hana, these are powerful people who have been training warriors for centuries. What can we say to convince them that your way is better? Hana did not have an answer. How could she prove that adaptation was more valuable than tradition? That flexibility was stronger than rigid honor? That survival mattered more than pride? The answer came from the cubs themselves. That afternoon, Thornkal, Prisna, and Chilak requested a formal meeting with Commander Vextar. When he refused, they invoked an ancient coalition right called trial by advocacy. It was an old law, rarely used, that allowed students to defend their instructor through demonstration rather than words. They demanded that their unit be tested against a senior cadet unit in a full combat simulation. If the Cubs won, all charges against Hana would be dropped. If they lost, Hana would leave immediately and the Cubs would accept disciplinary action. Word spread through the station like fire. The Cubs, the youngest students at the academy, were challenging senior cadets who had been training for years. It was unheard of. It was probably suicidal, but it was also legal. Commander Vextar could not refuse. Lieutenant Kriva smiled when he heard the news. They are handing us the perfect ending, he told the other instructors. The Cubs will be humiliated. The humans' methods will be proven worthless, and we will finally be rid of this contamination. The simulation was scheduled for 3 days later. 3 hours, multi-terrain, full combat scenario, objectives hidden. The senior cadets were told to show no mercy. When Hana heard about the challenge, she found Thornkal in the practice yard. He was running drills with the other Cubs, their movements sharp and coordinated. Why did you do this? She asked him. You could get hurt. You could fail. Your families... We'll see what we have learned, Thornkal interrupted. Instructor Kim, you taught us that humans survive by adapting, by using what they have instead of wishing for what they do not have. You taught us that losing with honor is less important than surviving with cleverness. But you are not human. You do not have to fight like humans. Thornkal looked at her with his deep brown eyes. No, he agreed. We do not have to. We choose to. Because we saw you fight me and we saw you survive what should have killed you. If humans can do that while being small and weak, imagine what we can do. Hana felt something tight in her chest. These Cubs understood. They really understood. Then I will help you prepare, she said. The day of the combat simulation arrived. The entire academy gathered to watch. Instructors, cadets, even some visiting officers had come to see the spectacle. In the front row sat Admiral Drakmore, Thornkal's father, his massive form radiating disapproval. Beside him was Grand Marshal Thexarin, the head of all Coalition Military Command, who had traveled specifically to witness this unusual event. Hana stood with Captain Jinwoo Lee in the observation deck. Below them, the simulation arena was preparing to load. It was a massive space that could recreate any terrain, any weather, any combat scenario. Today it would test everything the Cubs had learned. The senior cadet team entered first. There were 20 of them, each one carefully selected. They were older, bigger, more experienced. Many were already 18 or 19 years old, about to graduate to full military service. They moved with confidence, weapons ready, formation tight. Then the Cubs entered. All 40 of them looked small by comparison. Even Thornkal, the largest, was dwarfed by some of the senior cadets. They carried lighter weapons, wore lighter armor. They looked like children playing soldier. The watching crowd murmured. Some placed bets on how quickly the Cubs would lose. Lieutenant Kriva stood with his arms crossed, satisfaction clear on his face. Commander Vextar's voice echoed through the arena. The scenario is simple. Capture the enemy flag and return it to your base. 3 hours maximum. Full sensory warfare permitted. Injuries are simulated but feel real. Surrender is allowed at any time. He paused. Begin. The terrain loaded instantly. The arena transformed into a mountainous region with dense forests, rivers, and caves. The senior cadets immediately moved to high ground, taking the strategic position that every traditional military doctrine taught. They set up defensive positions, posted scouts, prepared for the Cubs to attack their fortified location. But the Cubs did not attack the high ground. In fact, they seemed to vanish into the forest entirely. Minutes passed, then 15 minutes. The senior cadets held their position, waiting. Their training said to hold the advantage, make the enemy come to you. But the enemy was not coming. Then the first ambush happened. 3 senior cadets patrolling the river were hit from underwater. Sisera and 2 other serpentine Cubs had hidden beneath the surface, using breathing equipment salvaged from the terrain. They struck fast, simulated venom spreading through the senior cadets' systems before they could even call for help. The senior team reacted, sending a squad to investigate. But the squad found nothing. The Cubs had already moved. An hour passed. The senior cadets remained on high ground, growing frustrated. This was not how battles were supposed to work. The enemy should attack their position. Instead, the Cubs were everywhere and nowhere, striking at weak points, retreating before reinforcements arrived. A senior cadet stepped on what looked like solid ground. It was a trap. The ground collapsed, dropping him into a pit where waiting Cubs swarmed him with simulated stun weapons. He was out before he could fight back. The senior commander finally gave the order to abandon high ground and hunt the Cubs actively. It was what the Cubs had been waiting for. The moment the senior cadets left their fortified position, they lost every advantage. In the dense forest, strength mattered less than speed and cleverness. The Cubs did not fight fair. They did not fight with honor. They fought like prey that had learned to be predators. Thorncal used his size not to dominate but to shield smaller Cubs. He drew fire, absorbed hits while the others struck from unexpected angles. Priscilla climbed trees with her forearms dropping onto enemies from above. Chilak and the crystalline Cubs used their bodies to create false signals, confusing enemy sensors while their teammates attacked from completely different directions. They did not try to be stronger than the senior cadets. They tried to be smarter. When the seniors expected a frontal assault, the Cubs flanked. When the seniors split up to cover more ground, the Cubs concentrated their forces to overwhelm isolated groups. When the seniors fortified a position, the Cubs simply went around it. It was not traditional warfare. It was human warfare. It was adapting to the situation instead of following doctrine. It was using every advantage, no matter how small. It was refusing to fight the enemy's battle. 2 hours into the simulation, the senior cadets were down to half strength. They had regrouped into a tight defensive formation, trying to protect their flag, but they were exhausted, frustrated, and demoralized. Nothing they had learned in years of training had prepared them for an enemy that refused to fight properly. The Cubs attacked the defensive formation from 5 directions at once, not with overwhelming force but with coordinated precision. Each group had a specific job. Some created diversions, some broke the formation structure, some struck at command and communication. And while the senior cadets scrambled to respond to multiple threats, a small team led by Priscilla slipped through the chaos and reached the flag. When the simulation ended, the Cubs stood victorious, the captured flag in Priscilla's hands. The senior cadets lay scattered across the terrain, simulated injuries keeping them down. The entire battle had lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. The observation deck was silent. Nobody had expected this. Nobody had believed it possible. Grand Marshal Thex Aaron stood. He was an ancient being, his species long-lived, his experience spanning decades of military command. He descended to the arena floor where the exhausted Cubs stood at attention, bleeding from simulated wounds, barely able to stand, but still standing for 5,000 years, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the arena. The Coalition has bred warriors. We have prized strength, honor, natural superiority. We have won countless wars against species who could not match our power. He walked slowly through the ranks of Cubs. We have built our military on the foundation of traditional warrior culture. The strong lead, the weak follow. This is the way it has always been. Hana felt her heart sink. This was it. The dismissal. The proof that human methods had no place here, but Thexaren continued. And in all that time, in 5,000 years of warfare, we have never once faced an enemy that adapted faster than we did. He stopped in front of Thornkal. Until humanity arrived. Until we met a species that survives not through superiority, but through adaptation, through cleverness, through refusing to accept that weakness is failure. He turned to face the watching crowd. Today, these cubs showed us what we have been missing. They showed us that our traditional methods, while powerful, are limited. They showed us that there is strength in adaptation, that there is honor in survival. That victory belongs not to the strongest warrior, but to the one who refuses to lose. Admiral Drakmor stood, his massive form tense. Martial, with respect, these cubs abandoned their warrior heritage. They fought like humans. Thexaren finished. Yes, they fought like humans. And they won. He looked at Hana in the observation deck. Corporal Kim, come down here. Hana descended to the arena floor on shaking legs. She stood before the Grand Marshal, waiting for judgment. The charges against you are dismissed, Thexaren said. Furthermore, you are promoted to Head of Adaptive Tactics Instruction. Your methods will be studied and integrated across the entire Academy. We have been teaching strength for 5,000 years. It is time we learn to teach adaptation as well. The arena erupted. Some instructors applauded. Others looked angry. Admiral Drakmor sat down heavily, his expression unreadable. Lieutenant Kriva simply stared, as if unable to process what had happened. But the cubs were cheering. All 40 of them, exhausted and injured and victorious, were cheering for their human instructor. Thornkal approached Hana. Instructor Kim, he said formally. You told us humans survive by adapting. You taught us to do the same. You didn't mirror my weakness, Hana said quietly. You learned to make weakness a weapon. That's not human. That's evolution. Maybe, Thornkal agreed. But you showed us it was possible. Later that evening, Hana stood alone in the training yard where she had first met the cubs, where they had ignored her, mocked her, dismissed her as weak. She thought about everything that had happened, the pain, the humiliation, the constant struggle to prove that she belonged here. She thought about Lieutenant Kriva's words. Young, small, weak. He had been right. She was all of those things. But she had also been something he had not understood. Persistent. The cubs had not needed her to be strong like them. They had needed her to show them that there were other kinds of strength. That survival was its own victory. That adapting was more powerful than dominating. Yuna found her there. I heard the news. Head of Adaptive Tactics Instruction. That's a real position they just created for you. I know, Hana said. I'm still processing it. Those cubs love you, you know that, right? They risked everything to defend you. They didn't defend me, Hana said. They defended what they learned. There's a difference. Maybe. Yuna smiled. But I think they learned it from the right person. The next morning, Hana returned to the training yard. The cubs were already there, waiting. All 40 of them, plus a dozen new cadets who had requested transfer to her program. Word had spread quickly. Everyone wanted to learn the humans' methods now. Hana stood before them and smiled. Good morning. Let's begin. They ran together, human and alien, weak and strong, learning from each other. The galaxy had tried to shame the human at drill. Instead, she had taught the cubs to mirror not her weakness, but her refusal to accept it. And in doing so, she had changed everything.